Hey, Tim.
Hi, Caleb. How's it
How's
going?
it going? Not bad.
Going okay here too. Hi, Gwen.
Hello.
Hey, Aaron. How's it going?
Oh my gosh, it's Aaron. Wait, what are you doing here?
I'm just lurking. Can't a guy show up to a random release team meeting without having a role?
Wow, what a
Of
lurker.
course. You're totally welcome.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm just gonna lurk for a while.
Yeah, because you're good at that.
Yeah, you also got that mastery of delivery there. I'm gonna lurk for a while.
Is there like a subtle message hinted in there somehow?
It's fine.
Hey, Aish.
Hey guys, hi, hello.
Oh,
Are you still in Israel, Caleb?
Yep.
Nice.
I started typing a few names of attendees in the minutes, but I think I'm going to leave that to you all to do so I can actually think about the words coming out of my mouth. Say things that maybe make sense. All right, it's a minute or almost two after, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm guessing this will probably be a relatively short meeting given where we are in the cycle, but wanted to go over basic test status, feature collection, how it's standing at the moment, get a sense of current issues as well. So I do want to remind folks that we're kind of going to give an experiment to having 2 meetings at different times for different time zone inclusiveness. So we will sort of repeat this meeting tomorrow morning extra early, and we'll see what we get for additional shadows from the other time zones calling in, and we'll see how that goes for the next couple of weeks and give it a go and see what happens. And that was the main thing that I wanted to share with folks, and then go off into test status features and issues. So I see, yes, Mohammed is on. So can we start with you with test status?
Yeah, okay. So as far as the tests are concerned, we've had a number of failing tests, and also on both master as well as upgrade. So a couple of issues were closed, and some of them are being tracked. That is, there are PRs open for trying to fix them. I've seen a bunch of failures on the upgrade, for which I've already raised issues for a couple of them. I'll be raising more. And most of the master is actually stabilizing. So master blocking is kind of stabilizing. There are a couple of flaky tests. Otherwise, it looks okay right now. So I would guess the overall status is kind of yellow right now, as far as test is concerned.
Yeah, I feel like over the last week, a number of things kind of flaked, or we had a few small breakages. Are you going to send out a status this week? Just maybe a listing of the current issues that are open?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll send out those issues.
Across those issues, is there anything, I know a number are cluster lifecycle. Are there any others that are standing out in terms of specific areas, and do you need any help reaching out to any of the SIGs?
As things stand, I'm able to reach out to the people. Like, I have got good response on the issue that I've already raised. The mostly tests are failing around SIG cluster lifecycle and SIG networking.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of them on SIG storage as well. Otherwise, everything else is looking okay. and most of the tests are around GCI, GKE failures.
Okay.
Mohammed, quick thing.
Yep.
I see the GC downgrade tests failing. I mean, basically the
Yep.
downgrade job itself. So it looks like
Yep.
the downgrade itself is failing. Is
Yep.
that tracking issue? Are you okay?
Yeah, that's what I said. I saw those issues, and I mean, I've seen those failures happening. So I was going to raise those issues today.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this reminds me, last week we talked about doing just sort of a run through of test grid, and I forgot to put that on the agenda. Mohammed, could I put you on the spot to share your screen, or do you have the ability to do a screen share right now?
Not at the moment, but we could schedule it sometime.
Okay. And we could do it tomorrow or next week as well. I want to make sure that folks broadly across the team have gotten a sense of test grid and where to click on what, and kind of thinking out loud going through it, because it's some of the things aren't always immediately obvious. We can hit that a little bit later still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. We could definitely hit up a schedule like whenever there's a ready. I'll make sure that I have screen share available there.
Okay.
That point of time.
All right. I guess let's follow test status with issues and then leave features for the last, because I suspect that'll have a little bit more conversation. So Gwen?
Whoops, I think I put all my notes under the wrong rubric there in the notes. Those are all mine. I should have put that under issues instead of feature collection. Yep, all of that. So I'm seeing, when I compare the open features to the, what is happening? So currently I'm only seeing like 4 open bugs. 2 of them need the milestone approval, and I'm not actually sure how that works. So I called those out individually. I don't know if I should do anything there. There's one that I noticed about the persistent volume creation, which I think should go away because somebody did some research and found a workaround. So I'm going to follow up and say, hey, can you either just post a workaround or figure out what the deal is here? Because I think the last activity was seen about a week ago, which I just generally get the feeling that everyone is just still kind of like on the slow uptake on most of these, which I guess is fair given where we are in the release cycle.
Yeah, and it's also, I feel like I get a little hint of it being summertime for some folks as well. And
yes,
so, yeah,
actually, I think what I saw is some people just like putting in a priority important soon label and then just vanishing. So I'm assuming they're probably out on vacation.
Yeah. And then there's some conference travel that folks had last week and also this week. So I think there's a number of things going on there. And it's also this time of the cycle, it seems like traditionally there's not as much issues. And then really starting last cycle I think was the first full cycle where issues weren't required on PRs, but definitely there was a lot less issue volume going on. And it picked up a bit towards the end, but versus PRs, it seems like things are skewing in the direction of PRs alone. And obviously, at the point in the dev cycle right now, people are working on things in advance of PRs. On the milestone part, that really should be the SIGs flagging it and approving it. So if it's not, just ping the SIG lead, the appropriate SIG leads there, and say like, hey, is this targeted for the milestone? And don't forget to label and approve.
Yep, awesome. And then I was looking at the features collection as well. I don't know if that is necessarily my job, but I wanted to see what the features were. There is still a little bit of a discrepancy between tracked yes and open feature issues in KK, which I don't know where the discrepancy comes from. It's possible that some of those issues are not in core Kubernetes. Do we have some automation? I didn't even see some. There weren't even like mentions in some of the features issues, so it was really hard to track down.
There's a distinction between being in the milestone and being in features, which I don't think I've seen anybody declare like what makes something a feature versus a bug fix. And like historically in software engineering, I think this is something we do bad. Like, oh, it's too late to get a feature in. Well, this is actually a bug fix. So I think that people deliberately make that line fuzzy at times. So especially where we are now, I think the important thing is to give them a glance through any issues that are open and see, does this feel like a feature? And if so, ping Steven and say like, hey, this one's not on your list.
I thought
Where would I see Steven's list?
Maybe that's the perfect transition to handing over to Steven to talk about features. Oh, and is he not on?
He's not. I actually just pinged him on Slack. He said I'm on a plane, so he's going to let me take point.
Okay, perfect. I had thought I had pinged him this morning to see if he was going to be on or not, and I misunderstood his response. Okay, so, all right, Kenny, take it away.
Well, then I'm not going to be able to give too much of a long update, considering I'm just now getting ramped up on everything that's been happening. But Steven went through on a tagging spree last week around Thursday, so I believe that he has got a lot of things that are in the features repo tagged. He gave me, and I just started it about 2 hours ago, just kind of doing a 1.11 triage, so looking at a bunch of the things that were milestones in 1.11 that didn't actually make it, and seeing if there's any current updates to see if they are going to make it in 1.12. So I'm currently 3/4 of the way of the list through of just seeing if there's any updates, if they're going to have any sort of changes in release, if they're going to be in stable or beta or anything like that, or if they're just going to hold steady. He also gave some leeway to help the other guys that are doing this as well. Let me make sure I say this correctly. He's looking at issues that have no milestone. That's the other one as well. So going through and making sure that those have something tagged to them as well. The two other shadows are going to be responsible for those.
And those are specific to things that have been entered into the K features repo as issues, but don't have a milestone.
I'm assuming that's what he's targeting, correct?
Yeah, the gap that Gwen was noticing between KK and other repos increasingly and K features is one where Steven had mentioned he and I think Jace were working on something for a proposal there, but especially as we do this splitting of the monolith, it becomes fuzzy where features are defined. And from a release team perspective, if we don't have some centralized sense of it, it becomes very confusing. So I just dropped a link for Gwen to answer your question more specifically in the Zoom chat.
Yep.
A link to the features spreadsheet.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, and there's some changes that we've introduced into that as well in regards of being able to see once something is moving towards something, because we used to be able to just see like it would just say beta. We don't know like what does that mean, it's moving to beta or like, you know, we didn't really know what it meant. So there's some things right now as being in tracked or in progress or graduating. And there's actually another great tab that was just created too. It's the bottom right, the far right one, where you can actually see the progress starting from version 1.9 all the way up to 1.12, exactly like where it was at in its feature life cycle as well. So I think that's something that a few people in the community have actually asked for.
Caleb, do you want to describe what you just shared there?
Right.
That's just a historical artifact of a way that we at one time tried to store and share GitHub queries so that we all are working from the same, I guess, tool set. And so that someone more enterprising than ourselves back then could do some kind of historical analysis, since point in time is since GitHub's API is very much point in time and not so much historical.
Yeah, later in the cycle, I think probably roughly from feature freeze onward, we'll start doing that in the burn down minutes here. And Josh should carry that on more or less. We didn't quite do the full every SIG leaderboard, but just to kind of keep things visually condensed, just highlighted what was what each time. And yeah, it's a pain. We can share the queries, but the results are actually what's particularly interesting. So having the link to the query is useful, but then also having the human condense it into, we had X number of issues, and here's the link to issue such and such and PR such and such, having established which those are for the record and being able to track those, because next week issue 66338 doesn't show up on the query results anymore. So yeah, in another couple of weeks, we'll have that in the minutes in a sort of templatized format to be filling in.
Yeah, I really appreciated that being part of the description for bug triage. There's links there now. I don't know what the other roles are, but I really appreciate that. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so in 15 minutes, we've managed to hit the key top level status points, I think, for where we are right now. We've got one more week. Week from tomorrow is feature freeze. At that point, we'll kind of begin to ramp a little more specifically, but right now things are fairly fuzzy and lightweight from the release team perspective. I'm not sure if everybody saw, this is probably worth a mention. Last week we had a bit of a hiccup on the 1.11.1 release. So Caleb had just finished doing a brain dump to Doug McAckern on branch management role and talking about how some of the artifact creation won't be too much of an issue, but there's a little bit of a Google or specific manual kick some stuff off thing, and it'll happen just at the end of the release. But then 1.11.1 ran into the same issue, and we all kind of realized, oh, this actually doesn't happen at the end of the cycle, but it happens multiple times for all the point releases too. So that led to some conversations inside Google, and there's an effort underway in the coming weeks to get that last little Googleism resolved as well. So that should make the branch management easier and also subsequent patch management. But for the release team specifically on 1.12, I don't think this is an issue. It's tracking to be resolved for us, but it's more of a pain point right now for the 1.x.y release patch managers who are needing to get things out. Anything else to add there, Caleb?
Nothing other than to note it's actually, we're kind of in I guess what I would consider kind of a regressed state from where we were. I mean, there's still ongoing discussions internally, but certainly it would be nice to get back to the place where we were in terms of cutting the patch releases. I'm hoping that we won't be, this team won't be negatively impacted by that. So my fingers are still crossed, even though you can't see them.
You know, we've got a month and a half plus.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have any questions they want to bring up? Things they would like to discuss this week?
Yeah, I have a question. How do we handle cleanup from 1.11? From 1.11. Exactly how does that work? Like, I know that some things are going to make it into 11.1 and all that stuff. How do we decide whether something is 1.11.X or 1.12, and what are good ways to stay on top of that?
So this is actually something that is reasonably well documented, I feel like, and but you wouldn't have seen it necessarily because there is a specific lead role for it. So we have the release branch manager, and they're looking at managing what patches are going into the release branch, especially once it's been effectively forked and things have to get cherry picked back into it. But that's only up until release. And then the role typically hands off, I think looking back through the list, it's usually been somebody different who manages the patches coming into that by cherry pick backports for the next 9 months or three releases. So we have somebody in that role from the 1.11 release team. We have somebody tagged for it in the 1.12, but as of today, the 1.11 teams person handles it, and our team person isn't yet into their position. It's there for that. There is a set of documentation on cherry picks and backports, but again, like a lot of the roles, I think it comes down to SIG leads noticing and saying, yes, this is something that should be backported and labeling it as such. And there's a set of labels that mark things as cherry pick candidates and cherry pick approved. And then on a cadence of a couple weeks or so, the given patch manager for the 1.8.9, well, what would it be? 8, 9, 10, and 11 currently? 9, 10, 11 are doing backports and putting out those releases.
Okay, awesome. That sounds, so basically you're telling me this is not something I have to worry about.
At this point, yeah, not something you have to worry about.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, or shall I call it a day? I feel like Aaron's making eyes like he's got a question brewing.
No, I was thinking if I did, but I don't think I do right now.
Zach had something posted in the chat.
Yeah, what was your link there, Zach?
Apologies, I was trying to unmute. Let me move over here to where I can be seen and heard. So this was just something that we kind of came up with on the SIG Docs team, because actually no one is a technical writer on our team. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of review, but we're all software engineers, so we figure why not introduce more software? So we wrote a little serverless Node.js app that's deployed on the AWS Lambda, and it's kind of periodically pulling the GraphQL APIs, which I found out somebody from SigDocs wrote, which is awesome. Anyway, so it uses the GraphQL API of GitHub to pull, and I guess, do you want me to share my screen? Would that help?
I've got it pulled up here, and it's super wide, so I don't know, depending on screen real estate, Zoom might not do a great job on it.
Anyway, so basically what it does is it'll periodically pull the GraphQL API looking at the 112 milestone in KK specifically, and just update this table with the various statuses. Obviously, that's the plural of status. Good Lord. I need sleep. And then we're using this to sort of triage and figure out what we actually need to go bother people for docs, because as it turns out, it's generally more than what's in K features, but less than the total set of all PRs inside of a milestone. So we've just been using this to dispatch work, but you guys were talking about, hey, do we have a way of being able to look at this further down the road at all the PRs and wrangling and reminding and all that good stuff? And I said, hey, we've figured out at least some of that stuff. So I figured I would share this. So if you needed to borrow that.
A question on it, so like just picking on the first one there on the list, 56358. If the milestone label got removed from that, would it still show up in this table and have something for a flag for a few days or a week or something saying like, hey, this thing disappeared?
Yeah, so it's a great question. That's actually functionality I was building in today, so I'm glad you asked. But basically, right now it doesn't remove anything if it's been removed from a milestone. So this is an add only, because I hadn't considered the reality that stuff could be moved out of a milestone.
But that's one of the big gaps, is that we're losing things potentially. And then I think on bug triage, I particularly saw this, where something would come up, a label, whether intentionally or inadvertently, gets removed. And then a week later, it pops back up as like, hey, here's this major thing that nobody did anything on, but it wasn't showing in our queries anymore. So that
right.
kind of, that gray space of persistence in there is important for us to do good risk management, I feel like.
So I guess the good news is, if it doesn't remove anything, then the risk management is simply, you might be over checking on PRs that are now no longer useful. But essentially anything that comes under the milestone of the 112 release will appear in the spreadsheet in one form or another. And then as it progresses through the milestone, anytime that the last activity of the PR is not the last activity in the table. It just gets updated with whatever the relevant details are, which is good enough for our use case. But if you need me to adapt it, I mean, I can totally make a more expanded Kubernetes 112 spreadsheet of all spreadsheets.
I wonder, you had kept a similar spreadsheet last cycle, and I had done that following on Josh's.
I know Josh did it last week,
Yeah.
last cycle.
Yeah.
It was a very similar sort of thing, and it was sort of add only until we chose to say, like, yes, we have vetted and moved, but then also sort of a soft move, or we'd put them off on a separate sheet so we could still notice if something came back up, that we'd have our sort of triage diagnostics there still that we could look back on notes wise. So I know that Josh was trying to build some automation and was bumping into some issues with GitHub specifically, but this is definitely an area where we have a need for a better tool. So I'm going to play with this some over the next week or two. And curious, Aish and Mohammed and Gwen,
Feel free to.
Your thoughts.
Anything that gets merged into the master branch of the GitHub repo I put in there gets auto deployed to the serverless app. So if you want to, it'll literally start working the next time you merge it. It's Node, so don't kill me. I know. I tried to write it in Go, but as it turns out, there's no good GraphQL library, and the marshalling and unmarshalling of JSON from GraphQL was very dicey. So I just decided to use Node.
Zach, couple of questions. So the fields here, they're just coming out of the issue, the fields in the issue, is that right? Yes.
So I can, the actual GraphQL query, it's hard coded into that's actually another reason why I chose Node, is because I really wanted to use GraphQL, because I didn't need the lion's share of all the pull requests. I just needed the thing I needed, or the fields I needed. So here's the actual query. I'll put it in the chat. This is probably not going to go well, trying to put it into a Zoom chat, but that's it. So just, the issue number, title, URL created at, whether or not it was merged, who the author was, and then any of the labels.
So one thing I have is for features or any new change that's going on, we also want to make sure that test coverage is there, right? So we ask the authors to mention that is test needed for this or not needed for this in the features and the feature bug itself. Is there a way to pull that information? I know it's free form text. There's no specific field where they would add that information. So I'm just curious how
you could parse through the comments and then search for, as long as it's sort of like a semi-regular expression. I mean, I'm not going to try to make a natural language processing project out of it, but I think we could totally, if there was a somewhat regular thing like this needs test, or some hyphenated snippet of text, then absolutely, we could parse through and do that.
The notes field, is that something that we enter? It's for us to keep track of things?
The notes field, so the notes field was just for us, on the docs team, we were just going okay, if this is in progress, or if I sent a message and nobody responded, this was just kind of,
Okay, cool.
So this currently looks like it's tracking PRs, but not issues.
Yes, so that's another thing I figured. Again, that we were designing this for our use case, but I'm actually absolutely loving the feedback. So our use case was simply we definitely don't need docs for things that aren't even done yet. So essentially, we only looked at PRs.
Sure. Yeah, no, I just, for me specifically, I'm being selfish.
Right.
I would love to see something that links the PR to the related issue. So.
I like that. Let me.
Yeah, from your doc specific perspective, that you've got the K website PR link totally makes sense. But in the abstract, this sheet looks exactly like what we were doing for bug tracking in the bug spreadsheet, and what Aish was doing for test failure, test flake tracking. And if we had something that combined those into a single space, it probably would give some positive visibility for all of us.
If you guys are interested in, because I might be out of scope for this particular meeting, if you're interested in setting up like a half hour or hour outside of this to sit down and kind of work through requirements for it, I'm happy to make a weekend project out of this. I just finished my last semester of school, so I have some free time before the next one starts up.
Okay. Well, let's do that. I think
Okay.
from my perspective, it looks like there would just be a few little bits of additional information, and then we'd want to kind of agree on how we use it. So doing the triage, who owns it, and updates of the notes, or the human editable non-queried fields that we have some. So it's not just chaos in there, but
Right.
yeah, this would be useful. And I'm presuming, so do you have some way of controlling access to it?
Yes, it's almost exact. It's a mirror basically of how G Sheets works. It just doesn't have the weird complication of OAuth that I didn't like with G Sheets.
Okay, and from that perspective, then I'm curious to see if it's easier for folks in geographies where they have trouble accessing Google things.
Yeah, that's actually that's a valid point. I can check to see if Airtable is blocked in Chinese. Airtable blocked. It is. Oh, this is probably not gonna. This is not gonna end well, I'm sure. The DNS test, domain to check. I am not a robot. And
Guys, I'm
check.
dropping off for a minute. Sorry.
Okay. It is pending. It is, yeah, so we can, everywhere in China it is accessible. So this would be a viable use case in more firewalled countries. I can't say the same for North Korea, but I don't know if we currently have any North Korean-based contributors.
Well, let's play with this a bit over the coming weeks and see, maybe, and have a discussion about a few little feature adds maybe, and see if it feels constructive.
You guys are okay with Node.js, right? I'm not going to get fired, am I?
I don't have to run it for you. I don't care.
That was my favorite thing. It was like serverless deployed, done.
If it works, then it's
Exactly.
made. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I
Awesome.
can't volunteer you to change the language when you've already volunteered and made it.
Anyway, all right.
All right. Well,
I had one other quick thing just while I'm
go for
thinking of it. I'm going to go ahead and finally follow through on changing priority failing test to kind failing test. There are a couple docs I'm going to have to update in the SIG release repo. I'm assuming you're all cool with just sort of a find replace, but if you care, I could also put in a historical, hey, this used to be so-and-so, now it's so-and-so.
It's get the history's there.
Yeah, all right. So email out to KDev later today.
Cool. Stephen Augustus also has a similar thing out there around some of the features labels, but yeah, so continuing, I mean, this is a work in progress, cleaning up labels and streamlining processes, making things more obvious and understandable to new users as well as us. I don't know how many times I did that one wrong myself.
Yeah, I think the only person who might care here is that reduces toil on CI signal a little bit, because now you don't have to anyway.
All right. Well, I guess with that, I will call it. And anybody who's able to attend tomorrow morning, we'll kind of repeat this a bit, go over current status. Not a lot will have changed in a day, but share the things that we've talked about with the folks in other time zones and see what other additional input they might have on questions and processes and things. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Bye. See you.
Cool. See you guys.